in which our happy couples learn that life is not easy, whether as newlyweds or as recent divorcees. Chapter 3. A crowd of people, especially women, surrounded the church which was lit up for the wedding. Those who had not managed to get into the middle crowded around the windows, shoving, arguing, and looking through the grilles. More than 20 carriages had already been ranged along the street by policemen. A police officer, disdainful of the frost, stood at the entrance in his dazzling uniform. More carriages kept driving up, and ladies in flowers picking up the trains of their dresses, or men removing their caps or black hats, entered the church. Inside the church itself, both lustres were already lit, as well as all the candles by the icons. The golden glow on the red background of the iconostasis, the gilded carvings of the icon cases, the silver of the chandeliers and candle stands, the flagstones of the floor, the rugs, the banners up by the choirs, the steps of the ambo, the blackened old books, the cassocks and surplices, everything was flooded with light. To the right side of the heated church, in the crowd of tailcoats and white ties, of uniforms and brocades, velvet, satin, hair, flowers, bared shoulders and arms and long gloves, there was subdued but lively talk, echoing strangely in the high cupola. Each time the door creaked open, the talking in the crowd hushed, and everyone turned, expecting to see the bride and bridegroom enter. But the door had already opened more than 10 times. And each time it was either a latecomer who joined the circle of invited guests to the right, or a spectator who had tricked or cajoled the police officer into letting her join the crowd of strangers to the left. The relatives and the strangers had already gone through all the phases of expectation. At first it was supposed that the bride and bridegroom would come at any moment, and no significance was ascribed to the delay. Then they began glancing more and more often at the door, talking about whether something might not have happened. Then the delay became awkward, and the relatives and guests tried to pretend that they were not thinking about the bridegroom, but were taken up with their own conversations. The proto-deacon, as if to remind people of the value of his time, kept coughing impatiently, making the glass in the windows rattle. From the choir came the sounds now of voices warming up, now of bored singers blowing their noses. The priest was constantly sending the beadle or the deacon to see if the bridegroom had come, and in his purple cassock and embroidered belt came out at the side door more and more often in expectation of the bridegroom. Finally, one of the ladies, looking at her watch, said, "It is odd, though," and all the guests became agitated and began to voice their astonishment and displeasure. One of the groomsmen went to find out what had happened. Kitty, all the while, had long since been quite ready, in white dress, a long veil, and a coronet of orange blossoms, and stood with her sponsor and sister Natalie in the reception-room of the Sherbatsky house, looking out of the window, waiting in vain for word from her best man that the bridegroom had arrived at the church. Levine, meanwhile, in his trousers, but with no waistcoat or tailcoat, was pacing up and down in his room. constantly thrusting himself out of the door and looking into the corridor, but the one he was expecting was not to be seen in the corridor, and, coming back in despair and throwing up his hands, he addressed the calmly smoking Stepan Arkadyevitch. "Has any man ever been in such a terribly idiotic position?" he said. "Yes, it's stupid," Stepan Arkadyevitch agreed with a soothing smile. "But calm down, they'll bring it in a moment." "No, really," Levin said with suppressed rage. "And these idiotic open front waistcoats, impossible," he said, looking at the crumpled front of his shirt. "And what if my things have already been taken to the station?" he cried in despair. "Then you'll wear mine." "I should have done that long ago." "It's better not to look ridiculous. Wait, things will shape up." The trouble was that when Levin had asked for his clothes, Kuzma, his old servant, had brought the tailcoat, the waistcoat, and everything needed. "But where's the shirt?" cried Levin. "The shirt is on you," Kuzma replied with a calm smile. It had not occurred to Kuzma to lay out a clean shirt, and on receiving the order to have everything packed and taken to the Shtcherbatskys', from where the newlyweds were to set out that same night, he had done just that, packing everything except the dress suit. The shirt, worn since morning, was wrinkled and impossible with the now fashionable open front waistcoat. It was too far to send to the Shtcherbatskys'. They sent a footman to buy a shirt. He came back. Everything was closed. It was Sunday. They sent to Stepan Arkadyevitch for a shirt. It was impossibly wide and short. They finally sent to the Shtcherbatskys' to have the luggage unpacked. The bridegroom was expected to the church, and here he was, like an animal locked in a cage, pacing the room, poking his head out to the corridor and recalling with horror and despair all that he had said to Kitty and what she might be thinking now. At last the guilty Kuzma, gasping for breath, came flying into the room with the shirt. "Nearly missed them. They were already loading into the cart," Kuzma said. 3 minutes later, not looking at his watch so as not to rub salt into the wound, Levin went running down the corridor. "That won't help now," Stepan Arkadyevitch said with a smile, unhurriedly trotting after him. "Things will shape up. Things will shape up, I'm telling you." If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.